Hey guys, so today I'm going to be doing the next part of the video for the handbrake install on my simulator frame. Basically, where I left off last time, I've been trying to find a way to properly mount the handbrake to the frame, as well as figure out the switch mechanism for the input back to the G29 wiring that I did in the very first video. I've had a few dramas with that. I mentioned in the last video that I was actually going to look for a plate to try and mount the handbrake onto the frame. I didn't quite end up going with that method, but basically instead I bought these little brackets. They're quite strong. I think they're about 2.5 mil thick, and I'll be using them to actually mount the handbrake to the frame. I've already got one of those brackets on the handbrake, just there as you can see. And the way that will work is basically I'll be drilling some holes into the frame and lining it up to one of the existing holes that I had there for the other mounting points. So that's one bracket. I'll be adding another one next to it, as well as drilling in here for the final mounting point. I'm hoping that's going to be strong enough. If it's not, we'll see what else we can do to reinforce it. But I'm pretty sure that that's going to cover me for mounting that onto the frame. Now, the other thing that I mentioned previously was the switch for the handbrake. One of my mates gave this one to me. He's actually an electrician, so he had a few of these lying around. Basically, the idea was to use these two mounting points to mount a switch. And when you operate the handbrake, this bolt will come and hit the switch, which will then activate it. Now, mounting this switch is the issue. It seemed like an easy idea to begin with, but it's not quite as simple. So these switches are actually meant to be a panel mount, so you can screw it into a panel, and these two rings will sort of create pressure on the panel and mount it in place. So the idea was to use one of the mounting holes on a bracket, line that up, and then that would then provide the surface for the switch to mount onto. So the issue that I'm having is the switch is quite large, and finding a way to mount it onto a bracket, keeping in mind that there's going to be a bolt going through the base there, through the hole. It also lifts up the switch, which then causes some issues with how that lines up to the bolt that's going to be moving back and forth. And we may end up actually missing the switch when the bolt moves, or not providing enough of a contact patch for the bolt to hit the switch. Now, I still had this old contact switch which I was using previously in the old handbrake setup. What I've decided is, you might be able to see it there, but what I've done is I've marked out two places where I'll be drilling in and making a hole so that this can mount something like that. And then basically the way that I've bent the contact switch little metal bit there, that will provide enough force to press the switch throughout most of the range of the handbrake. Can't really show you at the moment because I'm holding the camera, but once I mount the switch on, you'll get a better idea of what I mean. So basically what I'm going to do now is drill out these two holes that I've marked, get this switch mounted, and I might add a little bit of wire on there so I can then connect it back up to the wire that I tapped into in the G29. So once that's all ready, I'm then going to work on drilling out these holes to actually mount the handbrake to the frame. Okay, so I've drilled out the two holes for the screw that's going to help mount the switch on. I've mounted the switch on now. I did have a small issue with basically I've got a reduced throw now because of where the screw actually goes. When you move the handbrake back, it goes and hits the screw. It's not a big issue. I only lost about 5mm of movement. So I'll show you what I mean in a second. So there you go, you can see now the switch is mounted onto the handbrake. So you can see how far the screws protrude into the middle of the handbrake. And if you notice the two bolts on the outside that move with the handbrake lever, they're actually screwed into that centerpiece, which goes and hits the screw just about there. So because this handbrake is quite customizable, when it first came, this piece here was screwed into these two holes here, so you actually did have quite a lot of movement. I moved it forward here because realistically you actually don't need that much movement to operate the handbrake, and even still though, that's still hitting the screw. I might do something about it later on, but for now I don't think that's actually gonna cause much of an issue. I've literally only lost from here, I've lost maybe about 5 mil of movement when that handbrake lever comes back. So I'm just going to try and record this with one hand. I'm not sure if you'll be able to hear it, but I'll tell you when the switch actually activates. Just activated then. Just there. So just once again, that's fully released. And that's when the switch activates. And that's the full movement. Okay, so I've drilled out those holes. I've also fixed these brackets onto the handbrake. So now I'm going to attach the handbrake using nut and bolts. And I've also got to put in the remaining 2 screws. I think I've decided I'm actually going to use self-tappers. The original screw that was in here was self-tapping. I might have to just find another one and just see how that holds up. So the reason that I want to use self-tappers is because this is actually an MDF board. So this will screw in nicely and make a strong hold. If I went all the way through to nut and bolt, these holes actually line up with the ones that are going this way for the brackets, and they'll obviously interfere with each other and won't actually go through. So when you account for the thickness of the base plate of the handbrake, the self-tapper should be just about right. Okay, so it's all wired in, it's all finally connected up, and now I'm just going to test it out in Dirt Rally. But that's pretty much the entire process I've gone through at the moment. Again, I mentioned that I'm going to try it out as it is and see how good it works. I'm probably going to try it out mainly in Assetto Corsa, and then if I do need to add an external reservoir to give it a bit of a better feel, then I'll probably do that later on. But for now, I think that's going to be the handbrake, and if I do decide to do the reservoir later on, I'll probably make a video on that as well. Okay, I've got Dirt Rally up on the screen. I'm in the advanced wheel options just to check if the handbrake's going to respond. And if you remember that I tapped into the R3 button in the first video, so when I operate the handbrake, you can see that the R3 lights up. I'm not sure if you can see that, but the handbrake is just here and the R3 button on the screen is just there. Alright guys, so that's my handbrake install on my simulated frame. Just to recap, I used the LOGITECH G29, and in the first video I tapped into the R3 button. If you haven't seen that, go back and have a look. That's basically where I did all the wiring for the LOGITECH G29, and it also applies to the LOGITECH G920 as well. Following that, I purchased a hydro handbrake. Now, although I haven't actually set up a reservoir and things like that for the actual hydro part of it, I am using it as a handbrake and it actually works pretty good. I may do a review on it later on just to see if I'm happy with it without the reservoir. If I do find that I do need the reservoir, I'll make another video basically detailing on what I've done to install that. But in the meantime, if you guys have any questions about what I've done in any of the videos, make sure you leave it down in the comments and I'll get back to you shortly. Now I just wanted to apologize that I haven't been putting videos out as often as I'd like to. It's about once a month at the moment. Now I'd like to get that up to about once a week, but it's quite difficult. I do work full time. Now I don't think I mentioned on YouTube yet, but I do have a baby boy. He's 4 months old now, so he keeps us quite busy. if you haven't got me on Instagram, I do post more often on Instagram, so you may see more of what I'm doing there. So be sure to follow me at krishy.g. Now some of the videos coming up on my channel is actually going to be around car videos. I'm going to Jamboree, which is basically a drag event at Willowbank Raceway, which is in Queensland. Now there'll be some high powered cars there. Now I've got the opportunity to strap some cameras onto one of the cars, so be sure to keep an eye out for that video. And if you're new to my channel, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks again for watching.